It seems the developer behind Orion Prelude done did fucked up, as, well, he admitted that his game ripped off assets from Call of Duty. Now let's give a bit of backstory before we get into the recent revelation, shall we? Now basically Activision reportedly pulled the game from Steam over allegedly stolen guns from Call of Duty, and the developer had admitted that, quote, blatant rips were made. Now, the boss of Trek Industries, the guys behind the game, David Prassel, said that he received a DMCA request from Activision after Orion had actually been pulled from Steam. Now, at the time, Prassel was very sort of vocal and saying Activision's complaint was unfounded. However, he has thrown up his hands and said, okay, I admit it, and he has fired the artist responsible. And he said on Steam, quote, I am now in complete compliance with their complaint and equally as mad. Last night I received evidence directly from Activision regarding assets not even mentioned in public yet. Upon receiving this, it became immediately apparent that blatant rips were made. While the artist offered to remake any assets at no cost, he has now been fired immediately upon learning this. Hiring and full-time development happens online in different time zones and different hours of the day. This can result in situations like this, and we are doing the best to avoid them. Now, he did go on to say that he has removed the content Activision flagged, as well as dev helmets from the game, which he had sort of compared to helmets from other games as well, so the guns weren't the only issue. And by the way, there will be a screenshot included in this video of the guns in question, should I say. And you will notice this is far from a passing similarity, it is pretty much a straight rip. Now, while this situation may seem not great, but simple enough on the surface, this is far from the first time that David Prassel has been in the news for something, well, shall we say, less than legit. The first thing is some very horrible accusations regarding the treatment of employees. Now, basically, this was all happening behind Orion Dino Beatdown. And now, this was a game studio by the name of Spiral Game Studios, but it was headed by David Prassel. And at the time, he was already being allegedly sort of accused of taking 20k from Kickstarter and then fired his team without warning and left them with no compensation for their work, essentially scamming the Kickstarter. And then many of the employees who worked for the company said that they were pushed to extreme points in order to push out content and meet their deadlines. For example, an employee even said they blacked out from being overworked, and there were other allegations of an intense autocratic work environment, and it just sounds awful and like complete hell, and they were being completely mistreated there. Now, that doesn't stop there with this particular game headed by David, as at the time a video was released of Orion Prelude and basically contained what to look to be an exact copy of Natural Selection 2's Armory. And even then, this wasn't the first time they'd been accused of stealing content. They were allegedly stealing models and weapon sounds and a few other things, basically just stealing things from other games and putting it into theirs. And there are even allegations that they had taken a T-Rex render from Primal Carnage, skewed the proportions, retextured it and redid the head, essentially stealing most of the work and changing it just enough so that you might not notice unless you were looking for it. So with all this in mind, the current shenanigans surrounding Orion Prelude suddenly take on a much more darker tone. You know, if you weren't aware of David Prassel's history, this might look simple enough. He, an artist had stolen some assets he didn't realise because of the setup that they have for development. He changed it and fired the artist responsible. That sounds simple enough on the surface, but the minute you start digging, you realise that the ground is putrid and rotten and full of worms as well. He has been at the head of companies who have been accused of some pretty damn horrible deeds, and with the overworking of their employees, working someone so they black out is not exactly good, and well, not to mention illegal as well as highly immoral. But also stealing other people's work and claiming it as your own, barely changing it enough to maybe escape a DMCA. And it looks like they just pissed off the wrong people. This time Activision are not a company to fuck around. They are a AAA developer for a reason. You don't get to that status by letting people rip off your assets so blatantly. And obviously there is such a thing as being inspired by something, and that's okay, but you can't just copy something. I can't just trace a game character and then put it in my game and say, yeah, this is totally mine, but it's got a different hat, and say that it's fine. So to be honest, I don't believe a word that he's saying because of his past, and it's entirely possible that he's telling the truth, but given everything that he's been involved with before, I highly, highly doubt it. This just looks like old habits dying hard, if you ask me. Now, obviously, I'm not going to be judge, jury, and execution here. I don't know what happened. It's entirely possible that this is an honest mistake, but there's nothing wrong with saying, look, you've done this multiple times in the past. Why should we believe you this time, kind of thing. So I suggest that you look into it yourselves, guys, and make your own judgments. My judgment is this is probably Hayden up to his old shenanigans, but of course I could be wrong. I'm perfectly willing to believe there's a chance I could be wrong. I just think that there's a bit more chance than a unicorn flying through my window right now. So there you go. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Do let me know your thoughts and opinions, as always, and I'll see you next time.